The attorney closed the folder and started collecting his papers before I realized what had just happened. He read the entire will. He never said my name once. I sat very still in that small conference room, watching my two older brothers shake hands like men closing a business deal instead of grieving a father, and something in my chest went cold and quiet in a way I didn't have words for yet. Before we go further, take a second, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you catch every new story we post. Now, back to Kayla. That's everything then, my brother Derek said, already reaching for his coat. Thanks, Mr. Halloran. I think we're good here. Actually, the attorney said, glancing at a second folder still sitting closed on the corner of his desk, there's one more matter. Your father left specific instructions about a separate document, sealed, to be opened only after the primary will was read in full, in front of all three of you together. Derek froze halfway into his coat sleeve. My name is Kayla Bruner. I grew up in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, above a diner my grandfather opened in 1961 and my father ran for 38 years afterward, Bruner's Family Diner, a red vinyl booth institution on Main Street that half the town still measured their childhoods against. I was the youngest of three, the only one who left. My brothers, Derek and Paul, stayed in Fond du Lac their whole lives, working the counter and the grill the way our father had, the way his father had before him. I wanted something else. Culinary school in Chicago, a line cook job that turned into a sous chef job that turned into a small but real reputation of my own, 300 miles and an entire identity away from a red vinyl booth with my last name painted on the window. This was never a rejection. It was just a different kind of love for the same thing. My father never fully understood that distinction. Every visit home for 15 years came with some version of the same question. When was I coming back to help run the family business the right way, meaning his way, meaning the only way either of my brothers had ever known? I never went back. Not permanently. And somewhere in those 15 years of polite, disappointed phone calls, I think my father decided that meant I'd stopped caring about Bruners altogether. I never stopped caring. I just stopped needing him to approve of how I showed it. Mr. Halloran, our father's longtime attorney, retrieved the second folder and set it in the middle of the table with a care that made the whole room go quiet. Your father came to see me privately about 9 months ago, he said, with very specific instructions. If any of you object to this document being opened here today, it gets sealed permanently and filed with the county instead. He wanted all three of you present, and no exceptions. Paul frowned. What kind of document needs conditions like that? Something he didn't trust either of you to hear about without me in the room. That's the only reason I can think of. Open it, I said. Derek let out a short laugh, sitting back down slowly, coat still half on. Relax, Kayla. Dad loved being dramatic about paperwork. Remember the safety deposit box scavenger hunt after Grandma died? This is probably nothing. It's not nothing. Nothing doesn't require this many conditions. Mr. Halloran broke the seal, unfolded a single typed page, and began to read. If you're still with Kayla right now, do me a favor, like this video, subscribe, and turn on that bell so you don't miss what happens next. Back to the story. To my daughter Kayla, he read, and I felt every eye in that room shift toward me at once, the same way it had felt every time my father introduced me at the diner as our chef in Chicago, proud, but somehow always slightly apart from the family standing behind the counter. I know the will you just heard doesn't mention your name, the letter continued, Mr. Halloran's voice carrying my father's words carefully, deliberately, like he understood exactly how much weight they were about to land with. I need you to understand that wasn't an accident, and it wasn't punishment, no matter how it feels sitting in that room right now. It was protection, the only kind I knew how to give you, considering I never learned how to say the rest of it out loud while I was alive to explain myself. Paul's jaw tightened. Protection from what, exactly? Mr. Halloran held up a hand, continuing to read. 9 years ago, I made a decision I never told either of your brothers about. I registered the recipes, the real ones, the ones your grandfather never wrote down anywhere but in his own head until I finally did, along with the Brunner's family diner name and trademark, into a private trust held solely in your name, Kayla. Not because I trusted you more than your brothers. Because I trusted you to protect something the rest of us were always too close to see clearly. Dad wanted this town to celebrate what our family built. He's going to get exactly that. Just not the way Derek was planning. Marlene had strung twinkle lights across the front windows the way she had every summer for 2 decades. A local news van was parked near the corner. Paul had arranged the coverage months earlier, back when this was still supposed to be a simple, sentimental town celebration instead of the ending to a fight none of us had known we were about to have. I found a spot near the counter and waited. By 6:30, the diner was packed. Regulars who'd been coming since my grandfather's time, town council members, 2 reporters, Derek in a blazer near the register shaking hands like a man about to announce good news instead of a man 3 weeks away from a deal collapsing underneath him. He still doesn't know I found the contract. He still thinks he has time. Priya stood near the door, quiet, professional, a folder tucked under her arm exactly the way we'd planned. I caught her eye once, a small nod passing between us, and I felt something steady settle into my chest. Paul found me by the counter, his voice low. "You're really doing this here? Tonight?" "Dad wanted this town to see what he built," I said. "I think they deserve to see the rest of it too." Around 7, the town's mayor stood up near the register to say a few words, the kind of warm, rehearsed toast small towns are good at. 60 years, 3 generations, a diner that had outlasted half the businesses on Main Street. Derek stood beside him, beaming, waiting for his turn to speak. When the mayor finished, Derek raised his glass. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," he said. "My father built something incredible, and I promise you all, Brunner's isn't going anywhere. This place has a bright future ahead of it." That's the last comfortable sentence you're going to get to say tonight. I stood up before the applause fully died down. "Since we're talking about the future," I said, my voice carrying clean across the room, "I think everyone here deserves to actually know what that future looks like." Derek's smile faltered, just slightly. "Kayla, now isn't really." "It's exactly the time," I said. "Because in about 60 days, if nobody in this room says anything, this location closes. Permanently. The name and every recipe on this menu gets sold off to a franchise company out of Milwaukee, and everyone working this counter tonight loses their job." The room went utterly silent. I laid it out clean, the way I'd rehearsed it with Priya for weeks. No shouting, no theatrics, just fact after fact after fact, each one landing heavier than the last across a room full of people who'd spent their whole lives measuring their memories against these red vinyl booths. I told them about the second envelope. About the trademark my father secretly transferred into my name 9 years ago, protecting the diner's identity from exactly this kind of decision. I told them about Heartland Griddle Company, about the non-refundable deposit already wired into Derek's account, about the debts from a failed real estate venture that had made this deal less about the family business and more about saving himself. "I have the contract draft," I said, nodding toward Priya, who stepped forward and set the folder on the counter. "I have the bank records showing where that deposit actually went. And as of this afternoon, Heartland Griddle Company has officially received a cease and desist, because they don't have the legal right to use my father's name or my grandfather's recipes for anything. They never did." Derek's face had gone the color of the diner's white countertops. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said, his voice dropping, the charm completely gone now. "That deposit's already spent, Kayla. If this deal falls through, I owe them $120,000 I don't have." There it is. The real reason for all of this, finally said out loud in front of the whole town. "You should have thought about that before you signed a contract promising something that was never yours to sell," I said. Marlene was the first one to speak from the crowd, quiet but clear. "You were going to close us down," she said, looking at Derek like she was seeing him for the first time. 22 years I've worked this counter, and you were going to let a company from Milwaukee decide none of us mattered anymore." Others started murmuring, regulars, staff, a town council member who'd known my father for 30 years shaking his head slowly, disappointed in a way that landed harder than anger would have. Derek stood there, folder open on the counter in front of him, watching 60 years of goodwill his family had built evaporate in real time. Paul stepped forward then, and for the first time since the will reading, he looked directly at his brother instead of at me. "I told you not to sign anything until Dad's estate was fully settled," he said quietly. "I told you it was too fast, too soon. You did it anyway." "I did it for us," Derek said. "For the family. You think I wanted to owe them that money?" "You didn't do it for us," Paul said. "You did it because you were already in a hole, and you decided this place was the fastest way out of it." What happened over the following months unfolded exactly the way I'd hoped it might. Back when I'd first sat alone in that booth at 6 in the morning reading 9 years of paperwork I never knew existed. Heartland Griddle Company, facing a clean cease and desist backed by an ironclad trust document, walked away from the deal entirely rather than risk a drawn-out trademark dispute. Derek was left personally responsible for the full deposit, exactly as the contract's terms had specified, $120,000 he had no way to repay without selling the one asset that had actually been his to sell, his share of the physical restaurant property itself. I bought him out. Fair market value, structured through PRIA, nothing vindictive about the number, just enough to cover what he owed Heartland and walk away clean. I didn't do it to be generous. I did it because I understood, watching him sign those papers in Priya's office 3 months later, that the version of justice that actually mattered here wasn't bankrupting my own brother. It was making sure he never got to make a decision like that again without my name on the paperwork standing in his way. He spent 4 months planning to sell something he never had the right to sell alone. Now he doesn't get to touch any of it without me at all. Paul and I run Bruner's family diner together now. He handles the counter and the deliveries, the parts of the business he always understood better than I did. I handle the kitchen, finally, after 15 years of building a career 300 miles away that taught me exactly how to protect the thing I almost lost without ever realizing it was mine to protect. Derek moved to Milwaukee that winter. We speak occasionally, careful, distant, the kind of relationship that might rebuild slowly someday or might simply stay what it is now. I've made peace with either outcome. Some evenings, after close, I sit alone in the same booth where I first read through 9 years of paperwork my father never explained to me while he was alive. The red neon sign glows steady outside the window, the way it has for 60 years now, the way I intend to make sure it does for a long time still. He never said the words out loud while he had the chance, but he made sure, in the end, that I understood exactly how much he trusted me, even when I couldn't see it yet. And now, so does everyone else in this town. If Kayla's story hit you the way it hit us writing it, make sure you're subscribed with that notification bell on. We post a new story every week, and you don't want to miss the next one. Tell us in the comments, would you have bought Derek out, or let him lose everything? See you in the next story.